I'm curious, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you see this picture?
Good.
That's a hero.
Brutality.
Security.
Authority.
A crime fighter.
Scared death.
Get to help people.
Protection. Like I'm gonna be in trouble. So what's the first thing that comes to mind when you see this picture? Americans have very different feelings when it comes to law enforcement. And those very different feelings are wrapped up in our demographics.
Somewhat unsafe, I guess. Security.
Safety.
How do you feel? Cato Institute reports that 68% of Caucasians feel favorably toward police, while only 40% of African Americans do. Other deciding factors are how old you are and how much money you make.
I'm a little worried. What did I do wrong?
Safety. Yeah, trust.
Why the difference in opinion? Well, that has a lot to do with those groups' different experiences with the police. One statistic that stands out is that black men aged 15 to 34 are between 10 and 16 times more likely to be killed by police than other people. Why are so many young black men disproportionately killed by law enforcement in the United States?
The fear of black men that goes deep into the fear of the slaves. And it's understandable why you'd be fearful of slaves. The very nature of slavery tends to provoke rebelliousness. So I think it's deep in the memory banks of the country.
Although opinions on police are split, we know there's no entire demographic that's anti-law enforcement, since 9 in 10 Americans oppose a decrease in police officers in their community. An overwhelming majority believe that we should take measures to reform our police system, including 89% of people who believe police should be equipped with body cameras, and 79% who think there should be independent investigations of police misconduct. Adding to the already complicated debate is a lack of consistency in state and local police practices across the country. In the United States, our police departments are not all uniform. In fact, there are about 18,000 different police agencies in our country with their own policies, procedures, and training.
And I think it's vital that we recognize that we have 1 million cops in this country. They're not all going to conform to a model of how we think every police officer should be.
Which leads us to our main question. If we were to make America from scratch today, should our federal government increase regulations on our country's police departments?
It has happened again. Just 9 days after the uproar in Ferguson, a grand jury in New York City has refused to indict yet another white police officer.
The Minnesota police officer who shot and killed Philando Castile just last year during a traffic stop has been found not guilty of manslaughter.
They determined that no probable cause exists to file any charge against Officer Wilson and returned a no true bill on each of the 5 indictments.
My son loved this city, and this city killed my son, and the murderer gets away.
On the other hand, the majority of Americans see increased criticism of the police as an attack on public servants. 61% of Americans say there is a war on police. And as the country has hotly debated policing in the U.S., the issue has turned political.
These are tough times to be a cop. Outside Atlanta Friday, officers from around the country mourned one of their own.
Well, the war on police continues to rage on. 5 police officers have been killed in the line of duty just this week alone.
So we reached out to the St. Paul Police Department for an interview, and they turned us down. A lot of police have been distrusting of the media, and so they turned down our repeated requests for interviews.
If you had to use one word right now to describe the relationship between the public and the police force,
I would say skeptical.
I'd say strained.
Strained.
Misunderstood.
So we finally got an interview with law enforcement, and here we are at the Inver Grove Police Department, and we're going to interview Police Chief Paul Schnell. Do you believe that there is a war on police right now?
I think many people in the profession would say that that's the case. I don't believe that that's the case. I don't think that there's a war on police. I hate that feeling when I know people are like super, super afraid of me.
Don't pull it out. Don't pull it out. Put your hands up!
Okay, I know a lot of people say, what the problems are and what the issues are with the policing system, but my question is, how do we solve them?
Body cams are absolutely essential, I think, to the reform effort. independent investigation and fact-finding and independent oversight of policing also essential.
Today's national standard for police use of force was set by the Supreme Court case Graham v. Connor in 1989, when the court ruled that the police use of force must be objectively reasonable and that it is to be determined by the point of view of a reasonable officer on the scene. Any further regulations on when police can use lethal force must be left to the states. However, a 2015 report by Amnesty International found that every U.S. state plus Washington, D.C. fails to comply with the United Nations basic principles on the use of force and firearms.
Yep, so here we are just 3 years out from the publication of our deadly force report in 2015, and unfortunately no state has yet risen to the level of international standards on how they choose to assess lethal force by police. So it's important that for a state's use of force law, in order to even be considered near the threshold of that, or we hope going in that direction, the laws hold officers to an accountability standard in which they're restricted to use force or to believe that they should be able to kill someone unless it's absolutely necessary, and that they're responding to whatever incident in a way that's proportional.
Let's set national standards for policing. 18,000 police departments, one constitution. Every single officer in this country is bound by that constitution. So we need reasonable, job-related, non-discriminatory standards that would bind every officer to the same practices when it comes to stop and frisk, laws of arrest, rules of evidence, and Lord knows, use of force, and particularly lethal force.
Some lawmakers in California have already started thinking about how to address the issue. This year, they introduced a bill known as the Police Accountability and Community Protection Act, which changes language about reasonable force to necessary force.
The bill unfortunately doesn't meet international standards, but we think it's an incredibly genuine first step to move towards that.
The lawmakers who support the legislation hope it would remove undue legal cover for police officers involved in fatal shootings, while allowing for the use of lethal force when necessary.
Our primary hope is that it would change the way that officers understand their role and that they ought to be more restrictive as to when they use force. It shouldn't be as permissive. And that the use of lethal force standards that are outlined in international law are not only about protecting those individuals, but the officers themselves. And so I think it's perfectly reasonable for one to assume that no one should attempt to take a life unless the purpose is to save one.
Those repeated incidents actually make it less safe for us to do our job. The thing for me is how do we create and build connections in the places where we have the least amount of trust. I would want people to believe that the worst that's going to happen is maybe you get a ticket. Maybe.
So Norm, you were a police officer for 34 years and you're the former police chief of Seattle. I'm curious, at what point in your career did it lead you to believe that our policing system needs to be reformed?
Well, you're going to take me down memory lane here, and it's a painful memory. 14 months into the job, I walked into the county courthouse in San Diego, where I was originally a police officer. And I went up to the prosecutor and I said, "You probably want to dismiss this case." And he said, "Well, why would I do that, Officer Stamper?" And I said, "Well, I arrested him for being drunk in a public place, unable to care for yourself or the safety of others, except that he wasn't drunk." So this prosecutor did not take kindly to my explanation that this guy used profanity and called me a pig, of all things, and I arrested him. And the biggest favor of all was a prosecutor who asked me if the Constitution of the United States meant anything to me. But Lord knows how much additional damage I would have done had that prosecutor not done what he did. And from that point on, I really did believe early in my police career, the police in America belong to the people, not the other way around.
The police are part of the community itself. Hopefully I envision a time where as humans, we can live in a society where we can have much more solidarity.
What do you want people to feel when they see police officers?
I want people to feel like maybe I was going too fast, maybe I was, but that they're a community resource.
You bet you give me $1. No bet. All right. Bang.
So what do you think? Do you think we should have stricter regulations on lethal force? Do you think there is a war on police? What would you change about the way our law enforcement operates in our country? That's it, everybody. That is season 1. Thank you so much for watching. To check out more content on this thought experiment, go to rewired.org and be sure to share this so we can come back. We want to see y'all again. This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.